Good morning, everybody. If you would turn this way for a few moments. Before Sensei does our setting of intentions, Shinyu and I would like to set some contextualizing comments for placing what's happening today in some of the longer arc of the Sangha's history. It can seem as though we're massively winging everything we do. And in a very real way, you would not be wrong. But in other real ways, you would kind of miss some vital component, and that is to say that the wisdom of the Buddha has been transmitted meticulously from generation to generation. And in that stream of transmission of the practice of the Buddha Dharma and the realization of the Buddha Dharma, there are certain structural features that, though they may well present differently, the heart of them is precisely the same. And what we're engaged in today is actually one of those foundational support structures that is sadly eroding all over the world. On here, on other places as well, it is actually flourishing, but they are too few. So I think for us to appreciate a little bit what's actually happening here is important, not to be taken for granted. So, entrusting ourselves to the Sangha, how is it that we are able to actually entrust ourselves to the Sangha? What does this mean in our world and in our day? As Sensei and I were walking over this morning, I remembered from I do not know where, and even Shinyu couldn't confirm, but there is, I think, an anthropologist or a sociologist, someone who put out this idea of the third place. I don't know if anyone shows those nodding. Perhaps you've heard this. Do you remember the fellow's name? I don't. Yeah. It's Shozo. The concept is simple but helpful. Where you live, that's your first place. Okay, where you work, where you go to school, if that's your thing, that's your second place. Okay, the third place is where you gather and you can do community, but it doesn't cost you to be there. It's not a price tag at the door like a movie, right, or a restaurant. It has to be a place, to be a third place in this author's framing. It has to be a place where community can happen, right? And entrusting ourselves to the Sangha in our time requires a stable place for the Sangha to meet and to gather and to practice. And that's what this is. That's what this building is, right? This amazing space, this amazing grounds. The Sangha can entrust itself to the Sangha, to the Dharma, because in a very real way, we have a space and a place to do that work. And so if you can recall, however long you've been around, there's always been versions of that place to practice that have always been kind of anticipations of this. From the very first zendo in the corner of the warehouse all the way to all the many spaces to this. This is actually the fullest expression. And finally, what a deep and full breath I can take. We have a temple to practice in. Right? That has always been true in some form. The Sangha has always needed a stable place to practice. It can look differently, okay? In the early Indic tradition, people would pilgrim during the non-monsoon seasons. But in the monsoon seasons, they would gather and have stability of gathered practice and teachings from the Buddha, and like this, right? And then when it moved up into China, then we get monasteries, and in Tibet, right? And it looks differently in different places. I am summoned. But there's a parallel component to that is maybe a little less obvious, maybe it's completely obvious, but the Buddha needed stability, right? In order for the Buddha to teach, the Buddha needed, let us say, housing, or at least a place to practice. So in those days, there was the benefactor, that's always a feature, and there's a grove that's given to the Buddha, and then he makes it a place where the Sangha can practice, and like this, right? And so today, the parallel component, we've had housing for a while. We've called it the abbacy, but it hasn't actually been able to function as an abbacy. It's functioned beautifully as a residence, and we, grateful, we bow to it. It was wonderful. We sheltered there during the pandemic. We watched this building raise brick by brick, beam by beam. It was live cast, mostly. But it couldn't really function as a true abbacy. Notice how many of you have ever been invited to the old abbacy for tea? No one. And there's reasons why. But in the new space, this is different. Now, I would like to be very clear. When that property came available, I had no idea what the house looked like, and it didn't matter. It could have been a fishing shack, and I kind of thought it was, really. Just by the look of the thing, I thought, oh, it doesn't matter. We need the land and keep it from being developed, and the Sangha can have this. And it turns out it's no fishing shack, okay? It's a substantial place that actually has the capacity to function as a full-on embassy. Who knew? But now we do. So when the question comes up, what even is an abbacy? Like, what is that? Is that, well, it's more than just where the abbot resides. It is certainly that. That's a hearty component of it. But the function of the abbacy is that in order for the Sangha to have stability of place and practice, the abbot has to have a vowed presence, a vow of stability, a vow of being here, right? And so the abbacy is actually what facilitates that. And if you go through different cultures and times, there's always some kind of a version of that that's a necessary component. And in this way, entrusting myself to the Sangha has a lot to do with cutting off other options. There will be no sudden retirement with a condo in Florida. Bye. That's not going to happen, right? There will be no, this is it, right?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Yeah. Happily so. I mean, but you should know that that's the deal. The abbot takes a vow of stability, of presence, right? And because that stability is there, then the Sangha can flourish. And so it has always been so. It has always been so. And I don't go around with a begging bowl, please may I have a sandwich, we don't do that. But the way it does look today is, here's the space, right? So I want to really emphasize that it's a physical manifestation of the Sangha's caring for the teacher, for the abbot and the teachings, and that's responded to by the teachers combusting their lives for the benefit of the Sangha. This is an intimate teaching of the Shokan path, but it's not hidden knowledge. There's this mutual care box in its lid, right? And every place in the mandala is the high seat for you as a practitioner, and there actually is a high seat. And that has to have a stable, vowed presence. Does that make sense? So I don't call myself monastic, but I am a vowed presence. I am an abbot, right? So this third place for the Sangha is enabled by us having a stable place to be and to practice. So what we're doing today is actually we're inaugurating this new abbacy. Now, beyond it just being a place for the stability to be safe and all this, it has functions for the wider Sangha as well that have never been able to come online in the old space. For example, when we open our Ango, right, there's a tradition we've never had the opportunity to enact before, which is that after the service and after the meal, the Shuso, if we're lucky enough to have one, and this Ango we will, starts here and then leads the Sangha on a trek through the temple grounds, which we actually have, right? And then at the summit over there where the terminus is, there's some ritual action and liturgy that happens. People enjoy the moment. And then they make their way to the abbacy where they have tea with the abbot and the teachers, see? And that's an integral part of getting started. There's a parallel maneuver at the end of an Ango where we do the same thing. Ango's closed, have the pasta, I recommend it, and then we do the trek around and then end up at the abbacy with serving tea again, okay? So right there's 4 times in the year where there's this formal, the Sangha comes to the abbacy, see? But beyond that, there's a lot of times when Jikai class of 2017, this Saturday night, come on over for a hangout at the Abbacy. Does that make sense? So there'll be lots of opportunities like that come up, and we're planning on this and really looking forward to having that be a part of keeping the Sangha connected to ourselves and to each other. So unfortunately today, more teachers are interested or need, I should say, to publish books, have a Patreon account, do all kinds of online things, publish articles, but not actually have students. They actually don't have students. They might travel around and do a seminar or do a talk here and there, but that stability and being willing to live with students, so to say, over the long arc of time is eroding. And thus, the Dharma is a little bit, well, the Dharma is not at risk. The Sangha is a little bit at risk. So, as a medicinal to this, here we are. The vow of stability is in place, and let's get it going.
Truth is, you never want to follow Roshi. But I was asked, this is really hot, to say just a few words, some more personal reflections on Samu. So one of the cool things for me about becoming a Zen student is that I got to learn a whole bunch of new Japanese vocabulary. I love to learn. I love language. I love learning new words. I learned a new word today that I thought was a new Japanese Zen word. Now I've forgotten it already. It was actually a Lord of the Rings word. What's the word?
The Rohirrim.
The Rohirrim. I was thinking, oh gosh, I've missed this word. Heresy of heresies. I'm not very up on my Lord of the Rings. I'm sure we'll be talking about this in the Dokusan room. But for me, one of those new and strange words was Samu. Back in the days when we still gave out loud instructions during sesshin, I remember hearing Yugen say in that gruff voice, prepare for Samu. I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was a bit worried because for a moment I thought he said, prepare for sumo, as in the sumo wrestling. But But as usual, I just played follow the leader and figured out that Samu literally meant work, everyday work, ordinary work. Although, of course, in our tradition, we refer to Samu as work practice, because Samu is, in fact, meditation that's being done in the midst of activity. Something to keep in our minds today as we do our meditation in the midst of our activity. And of course, we come to understand from our teachers that there's no separation between our practice of Samu and our Zazen practice, because it's not the specific activity that gives it its power, it's the quality of our attention, of being present and open, wholeheartedly engaging in that activity, even when the activity is cleaning the outhouse at the farm in the snow, which a few of us have done over the years. I learned later also about the famous non-monastic Zen Buddhist practitioner known as Layman Pang, who wrote who wrote a classic poem that describes how ordinary work can, in fact, be a deep expression of the Dharma. It's the poem upon which it often gets shortened to before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. But here's the poem. Layman Pang writes, "My daily activities are not unusual. I'm just naturally in harmony with them, grasping nothing, discarding nothing. In every place, there's no hindrance, no conflict. My supernatural power and marvelous activity," and I love that line. It's not just activity, it's like supernatural power and activity, is drawing water and chopping wood. So as Zen students, we come to understand that the primary role of our guiding teachers is to serve the Sangha as they point us towards awakening. This is an awesome and daunting responsibility. And as Rinzin Roshi just noted, and so many of us have experienced directly, they are combusting their lives for us in a way that never ceases to inspire me and motivate me. That said, the reciprocal role then of the Sangha is to serve our guiding teachers with gratitude for the privilege of being able to do so. And again, as we all know, and on a more personal note, Rinzin and Doan have literally opened their lives and their home in the service of the Sangha. I have so many memories from sesshin at the farm, but here are just a couple of them. I have one distinct memory of being at sesshin at the farm during the years when Isabella was just trying to live the life of an ordinary teenager. But she was having to do so with 20 sweaty, neurotic strangers sitting their asses down right in the middle of her living room, dining room, kitchen, porch, basement. I just was always amazed at the graciousness with which this whole family gave over their lives and their home and their space, their time, their energy. I have a precious memory of a time when Isabella came out of her room during a rest practice period, and she and her dad simply sat quietly on the couch together, saying nothing, but sitting quietly and looking out across the meadow there and the pasture and the woods beyond. It was very peaceful and very inspiring. Not a word was said. I kind of felt like an intruder. I was always amazed at what this family was willing to give to us. And I remember another weekend that coincided with what must have been some kind of high school mother-daughter formal outing thing, and I don't know what exactly it was, but Doan practiced with us during the day, and then I sort of saw her bustling around dressed to the nines along with Isabella because they were going out to some kind of dinner or party or function. And again, I just remember thinking, having my own teenagers, I'm not sure I would have been willing to have hosted 20 strangers in my house if I had other things on my mind, like going out with my kid that evening. And how precious and dear it was to me that you were willing to combust even that part of your life for us. So my point, of course, is to remember that we are all exceedingly lucky to be able to give back by our Samu some small measure of the time and attention and energy, the work that our teachers have given to us. And so as a sort of pre-intention intention, I would ask that we approach our work this day, helping to move into the new Abbacy with open, generous hearts and with love and gratitude for all that our teachers have given us. Thank you.
I'm gonna add just one more memory now that we've started that. There was a time, session, the rigors, right? The hunger, there's no food, it's early, Isabella's dad, I want bacon. I want bacon and eggs, Dad. So she marched herself out and she started cooking bacon and eggs. And she was really a great Zen master at that moment because everybody's sitting there like, so she had her revenge.
Well, I have a memory of her when we were at Lourdes College doing our retreats. We would go shopping for the food together, and we had these little carts, and she would jump on the cart with me as I was like rolling the food into the space. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the best way to practice is for everybody's just sort of showing themselves. There's this way in which there's a line in the Mumonkan, a Zen master opens their mouth and shows their liver and their heart and their stomach and their whole being. And I think we're so fortunate right now because with the Abbacy kind of coming online with this new function, like we will be able to just show our lives even more. And that's why we're here. Have it to be, this is very ordinary, as Lan Min Pong said. And as we're speaking this morning and sitting, I'm really aware that there's such a deep heart, soul hunger for this feeling of total connection. And so many people are struggling with the seeming lack of it in their lives. And how lucky we are, how fortunate we are to have this incredible third place. Just by showing up, we're totally giving to each other. We're giving our lives, our hearts to each other. This is, as Dado used to say, no small thing. So we're going to set an intention this morning that for the sake of all beings, to bring all beings, regardless of what state they're in, to full and complete Buddhahood. We are going to have such a great time enjoying each other's company, just enjoying this Dharma practice where touching an object, catching the light in somebody's eyes is all Dharma practice. And we are going to bring all beings to full and complete Buddhahood just through these simple, loving, kind acts of being together and shuffling things from here to there, making the space ready for a residency program as we continue to like hold this lotus to the rock and really plant the Dharma in the middle of America. May it be so.
Just to be very clear, in front of the Sangha, as abbot, I publicly and formally make the vow of stability to this place, to this Sangha. As long as I have breath in me to combust, I will do so on behalf of the Sangha. I will not leave. I'm not going anywhere. My next residency will be the cemetery back here. And even then, I will continue as best I can to continue to nourish the Sangha from that place. I promise. Let it be known.
We're now going to do the Samu liturgy. So we should stand.